Playing with Paper, Chapter 2, Part 1. I'm Andrea Deer with the whole kit and caboodle, and I'm so excited to teach you all about typography. In this lesson, we're going to learn the difference between typefaces and fonts, serif versus sans serif, leading versus kerning, and we're also going to go over the basics of pairing fonts to really make your titles stand out on your scrapbooking pages. Before we get started on our page design, let's talk terminology. Learning these key terms will help us as we begin our journey on utilizing and selecting fonts. Speaking of fonts, most of the time when we talk about fonts, what we're really thinking about is typefaces. The two are often thought to be synonymous, but they are actually very different things. Does it really matter? No, but using the proper terminology will have you sounding like a professional graphic artist to all of your scrapbooking friends. Typeface is the name of a particular style of lettering, like Times New Roman or Century Gothic, whereas font refers to the variation of that typeface, like when talking about its size or weight. So 10-point Times New Roman is a total different font than 12-point Times New Roman bold. In this entire chapter, we're going to dig deep into discussion on both typefaces and fonts. So let's get started on our page, and as we assemble our title, we'll pause to dig deeper into typefaces and fonts. All right, let's get started on the left side of our spread. So before we dig deep into the title and the fonts and the typefaces and the leading and the kerning, let's go ahead and do all of the pattern papers and kind of set the backdrop for all of our design elements. So pull out all of the pieces for this side of the page, and we are going to start with that white cream colored that has the gold polka dots. So if you flip it over, you're going to notice that it's actually from an Echo Park baby collection. Don't think you have to use this for a baby girl or a teenage girl, because chances are you're a female, so you can use it for you and your friends, your favorite aunt, your favorite family member, your mom. There are so many different things I think you could use this particular page for. But I'm going to go ahead and cut off the barcode strip of our background sheet. And then don't forget, if you have the booklet, the instruction booklet that goes with Chapter 2, Part 1, we give you an itemized list of all the different pattern papers that we use to create this page. I highly suggest, you're going to learn so much from that booklet, that you grab that booklet. If not, or if you want to make sure that you keep the information together with your spread, I always say to keep that barcode strip, because that will give you the exact manufacturer and name of the paper in case you want to purchase more of it later. All right, so that's going to serve as our background. The next thing we're going to pull out is, you see we have here this black with multicolored dots. So let's go ahead and pull that out of our stack of paper. All right, if you look at the back of this paper, you will notice it is Halloween, right? I love a pop of black in most of my designs. So even you'll notice that we're using a very pastel kind of color palette for this. I love that pop of black. So when I saw this and it has all of the colors that we're using for our titles, I thought, how perfect. So don't forget everything you learned from Chapter 1 when we talked about pattern papers. We don't want to judge a collection pack by its theme, right? Because you never know what particular pattern paper will be in there that will be just perfect for whatever your theme is, whatever your topic is for your page. All right, from that black with multicolored dot pattern paper, we want to cut 2 6 by 12 pieces. So we're basically going to cut it in half. And then we're going to go ahead and cut off that barcode strip as well. And then we're going to reserve one of the pieces for the next page. And we're just going to deal with one of these now. So it is a little bit longer than we need it to be. So we're going to cut this down now to 6 by 9. 6 by 9. And then we're good to go with that particular piece. Don't forget, all of these are also written in your instructions with this page, because obviously I can cut it down and move along quicker since I am the one that designed the page. So don't get caught up in the measurements. Don't forget to be looking at your instructions for those as well. All right. We are going to go ahead and glue this down. We want to make sure that it's vertical when we adhere this piece. And we are going to go about 2.5 inches from the left edge, about 2.5 inches from the left edge, and only about 1/2 inch from the top. All right, so I'm just kind of going to eyeball it here. Yep. All right. And I'm actually going to use the polka dots so that I can make sure that this piece is straight. So if you look here, I'm going to go by the row of polka dots, and then that way I know that that piece is already straight. I'm definitely one that I have to stand up when I scrapbook, and that's harder to do with the cameras. So I love to use little cheats like that. I love the Doodlebug has a graph paper series that has all of the lines, like a piece of graph paper. I love to use that too. That way I can make sure I get everything perfectly straight. All right, so the next piece that we're going to adhere now is this darker pink. So that darker pink from your pack is already cut to 4 inches, so it's cut to the right width. We just need to cut it down just a little bit. We're only going to cut 1/2 inch off. So that finished piece will be 4 by 11.5. So again, we're only going to cut off 1/2 inch. I just wanted to make sure there was just a little bit of a border on both sides of that pink. All right, so let's go ahead and add our piece of here. And when we go to adhere it, obviously it's going to be horizontal. Make sure that your hearts are reading the correct way, because obviously there is an up and down to this piece. We're going to do about 2.25 inches from the top. It doesn't have to be exact, but we're going to go about 2.25 inches from the top. And then again, I'm going to use my polka dots here so that I can make sure that that's aligned perfectly straight. All right, you can start to see it coming together here. You're starting to see the vision. All right, so after we get that piece down, we have a piece of pink plaid, multicolor plaid pattern paper. Looks like that one. This here is a Doodlebug paper. It's from their Cute and Crafty. So that I really love this side of it as well. But I wanted something that would bring in the other colors of the rainbow. So this was so perfect, right? Every color, the yellow, the orange, the green, the 2 shades of pink are the exact same colors of our rainbow here. It matched so perfectly. All right, so we're going to use this on both sides of the page, but for now we're going to cut this down to 5 by 12, 5 by 12, which of course leads a 7 by 12 piece. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off that barcode strip so that that's all ready to go when we go to use it on the other page. So this bigger piece here, we're going to reserve it and we're going to use it when we go to do the right page there. All right, so now that we have our 5 by 12 piece, we're going to cut it down just a little bit because we want to make sure that we see this darker pink on both sides. So I'm going to cut that down to 10 inches. We're going to cut it down to 10 inches. And then we're going to adhere it there in the center of that dark pink pattern paper. All right, running the adhesive there just along the outer edges. And I'm going to adhere it in the center of my dark pink, again, using the polka dots kind of as a cheat to make sure that I'm getting that straight there. All right, so we have one more, and then we're going to dive deep into all of our elements that we're going to add to this page. All right, so since our photos, we're going to go in this area, I didn't want the photos to necessarily go directly on this pattern paper. It's not necessarily a busy pattern, but busy enough that I was afraid that our photos might get a little lost. So that's why I added this lighter pink pattern paper. So those are going to kind of serve as the mat there, the base of where we're going to put our photos. So go ahead and grab that pink there with white stars, grab that paper out of your pack. We're going to cut it into a 7 by 12, a 7 by 12. And then while we're at it, go ahead and cut the other piece. So the other piece is going to be 4 by 12. Go ahead and cut that there. That way it's all ready to go for your next page. With the larger piece here, so with our 7 by 12, we're going to cut that down so that it's 7 by 8.5. 7 by 8.5. And then again, we are going to adhere this horizontally here, just like so. See what difference that makes? So while I love this here, I do love that combination because, you know, I love how all of those various colors, two totally different collections, but how those colors perfectly coordinate with each other. But it was a little busy to be the backdrop for our photos. So look, by just adding that piece of paper, look at the difference that makes. And I think that's really going to help our photos pop. All right, so I am going to run my adhesive, and notice by looking at the back of this, we are back to our baby collection from Echo Park. But again, this doesn't need to be baby themed at all. I actually feel like it can be very suitable to a grown up kind of design. All right, just like so. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut my photo mat. So I always say that's up to you. If you want to skip this step, we can go ahead and get all of our elements together. If you don't know exactly what photos you're going to use or how they're going to be placed, you're welcome to go ahead and wait on this next step. But for the sake of the sample, as always, I'm going to go ahead and cut my photo mats. So we have 2 vertical photos here. So my first one is 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. And then I'm going to have a bit of a smaller one there with a 5 1/4 by 3 3/4. All right, just like so. Then I'm going to go ahead and glue those down. You'll notice that I use that size of photo often. And the reason is I feel like to get multiple photos on a page, you often have to cut one or more of them down from that kind of traditional 4 by 6 print out for the photos. And to me, that it's easy, right? Because we're going to cut off just a little bit off of each side of our regular photo, and it kind of still keeps the proportions of our original photo, and we're not cutting too much off the photo, that we can still, you know, have that integrity of that main focal point still intact. With that, I will give just a small suggestion. I know since most of us are taking photos with our phones nowadays, we tend to kind of zoom in. I always suggest make sure you're leaving a border all the way around. With digital, you can snap, 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 right? It's unlike before when it was a still camera and you wanted to, you only could get 24 or 36 photos, so you kind of were more reserved, whereas nowadays we can just keep snapping along. So go ahead and zoom in if you'd like, but then I pull back out and leave all of this kind of white noise all around. That gives you a little bit of wiggle room if you need to cut your photos down. All right, so now that our backdrop is totally complete, let's go ahead and dive into all of our design elements. So I'm going to pull out the baggie. Let me go ahead and set this aside so we don't make sure we don't get any adhesive on our background as we are assembling our smaller pieces. And I'm going to pull out that baggie here. So let's go ahead and put together some of these elements. And then when we get to the title, I'm going to pause and I'm going to make sure that you really understand the exact principles of how these particular colors were chosen, the fonts were chosen. We're going to talk now about the kerning and the leading. So I really want to make sure we take some time with that title. So for now, let's go ahead and work on these other small pieces. And I am just going to take them out one by one from our baggie, so I make sure that I don't lose any. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start with my stars, just because that's the easiest thing to grab out of our baggie. So it could be a little different from yours. Outside of your title, it doesn't really matter where you start with these pieces. You'll also notice that I didn't use any chalking inks, which is very unusual for me. I love to use the Quick Quotes chalking inks to kind of give that soft edge, and you are 100% welcome to. This is your page. So if you want to ink these pieces as we go, please feel free to do so. Just push pause and catch back up once you finish inking those pieces. But to keep this really simplistic so that we could focus some time on the title itself, I didn't do any inking for this particular project. All right, so let's go ahead and start here. I'm going to use my Barely Art glue. I use the liquid adhesive when it comes to my die cuts. And don't forget, a little bit goes a long way. We don't need a lot of that liquid adhesive. We kind of want to reserve that as much as possible, because it doesn't need a lot to stay tacked down. So just going to use just little dots of it, just enough to make sure that it stays together. If you're new to the Barely Art glue, we offer it in a couple different sizes. So we have what I have here is the mini bottle. So this is the smaller 4-ounce bottle. We also have the regular size bottle, and then we have a refillable, so that you can just keep this and just keep, filling up your bottle. So it saves you some money in the long run. And it is a glue that can be shipped any time of the year, which is great. So if you are in the middle of winter and you run out, never fear, we can still get that in the mail to you. All right, keep going here. You'll notice when the team die cut these pieces, and I'll stop so you can see it here. All right, so if you look at that large star there, so when they cut that out, there's obviously a star in the middle that is kind of an extra piece. So you see there, that's the inside of that star. Don't forget when you're cutting these, save all that negative space. That's a perfect star, right? So therefore you kind of get a bonus one out of that cut. We're actually going to use that, so that's the inside of that star when we put together this set here. All right, so make sure again that you're saving the insides when you're die cutting those on your own. All right, just a couple more pieces here and then this triple star will be complete. And the same thing here where we had the star that would have been cut out of the middle of that one. We are actually using that as well. Alrighty, last one here. And then we'll have our triple star complete. All right, so there we go with our triple star. Again, it's a great way to bring in all of these colors. You can do it, you know, in whichever order. So you can start with your color, your desired colors for your die cut, and then go select papers that coordinate with that. Or you can pick your papers that you would like to use and then totally base all your die cuts off the color schemes from the papers. So either way is going to work, right? All right, so let's go ahead and put together these two remaining stars, and then we'll set those aside. And then we have the green that's going to go there in the center of our dark pink. You'll notice that I have intermingled the smooth or the classic collection with the canvas collection, actually, and with the glimmer as well. So with the My Colors cardstock, we have all of these different finishes of paper with canvas and smooth and glimmer. I love intermixing them all. Truly, I go by color. So whatever group of paper has the color that I'm looking for, that's what I go for. So, you know, there are times where the color I need is a glimmer and that, you know, that little bit of shine doesn't work for the particular image that I'm cutting, but that's pretty rare. I really go by color. All right, I'm gonna set those aside. And then I'm gonna pull out our little ladybug here and put our ladybug together. So I'm going to adhere the green layer to the black. And then I'm going to pause just for a second. All right, because what I am going to do with this next step here, I'm going to adhere the two layers together, the green and that light yellow. I'm going to adhere those together, and then I'm going to use 3D pop dots to adhere it to the base. So that's totally up to you. I do love that dimensional little nod that it gives there. Kind of reminds me of like what a sticker would be. But if you're worried about the thickness, of course, that is totally optional. If you wanted to ink this piece here, again, we're not using any of the Quick Quotes color inks specifically, but you're welcome to do so. So this, I would say you could really lightly do like the palm tree for the leaves, and perhaps the desert sun there for the face. I would be really, really gentle with your touch. If you are inking these, it's a pretty small space there. And then I am going to use my 3D pop dots so that we can pop off those wings in the head. All right. You know me, I load up those pop dots. I like that surface to be totally filled with pop dots so that it's all level and the whole piece is popped equally. All right. And then I'm going to add that little head and wings to our body. Just like that. Perfect. All right, let's keep going here. So the next thing we have in my bag is the cloud, which is kind of a unique cloud, right? I wanted something that was really long, but I needed it to be pretty narrow, and I got really lucky when I found this one. I had actually used this one when I was working on my granddaughter's page. So my middle son, which is my granddaughter's daddy, rides a Harley. And so for their gender reveal party, what we did was we put some colored powder into the muffler so that when he revved the engine, whatever smoke came out of the muffler was the gender of the baby, which of course we know now was pink. But this was actually like the motorcycle cloud element that I used for that page. So I had remembered that one and was able, so it works perfectly for here as well. So it's not really your stereotypical cloud with your rainbow, but again, it was perfect for what I needed it to be for this. Oftentimes we can use the same design elements over and over again. And when you're doing it with a totally separate theme, no one ever knows. I mean, if you were to see this and then you were to, a couple pages later, see that Harley themed design, you would never really say, oh my gosh, she used that same cloud twice, right? All right. For our flourishes here, there aren't any layering, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull those out and set them aside. All right, and then I'm going to pull out my cloud. And we'll put it together, and then we'll stop, and we're going to really talk about the title here. So this is kind of more your stereotypical cloud for your rainbow, right? You're really not going to see it. So if you prefer, you could actually leave these clouds off and you can put them somewhere else on the page, because we do end up covering up if you do the design exact. So that I'm going to totally leave that up to you. I am going to go ahead and glue them in place. If you aren't going to glue them in place, though, I would go ahead and lay them in their place, because that'll help you put the other elements onto your rainbow, because it all kind of fits all snug all in there. All right. Okay. So I'm going to start on that outer ring there. That is totally up to you. We are going to have a little bit of that cream border. So don't go all the way to the edge. Make sure there's that little cream border there. When we adhere that piece, just like so. And the colors are really similar, so hopefully you can see, but you'll see what I mean, where the cloud kind of helps the placement there of that individual kind of ray of the rainbow. And then I'm just going to keep layering here, adding each stripe. So again, this is one of these great elements. I think rainbows are great on any page, because they work as a great way to unify all of the various colors that you're trying to add to a page. So again, remember how I stated that all of these, all of the individual strands here of our rainbow are the exact colors that we pulled here from our plaid pattern paper. So this is one of those elements that's perfect in bringing in all of those various colors. All right, let's keep going here. Color is one of those design elements that we will also explore with our Playing with Paper series. I know that that can always be a challenge if you're trying to match papers, if you're trying to match the papers to your elements, trying to match papers to your photos. So I think that'll be another great topic to explore. Alrighty, two more here. With our gold layer. And then lastly, we're going to end again with the pink. All right. Perfect. All right, so there we go with our finished rainbow. Again, since my particular design covers up these clouds, you can not adhere these clouds and go ahead and move those and use them somewhere else on the page as a design element. All right, let's talk about our title now, the You Are the Joy in My Life. All right, with this, I'm going to throw a lot of terminology at you. So this is one of those you might need to pause it and then keep coming back to it. But these are really basic terms that I'm going to use a lot throughout the entire portions of Chapter 2. So I want to make sure that you'll understand what I'm talking about when I say each of these terms. So the first thing here, if there's only one thing that you learn out of the entire Chapter 2, let it be this. If your title has 3 or more words, always change at least one of the words. Change its color, its size, its font, its typeface. Change something. And that's what's going to give your page real visual interest. And it's really going to make your page stand out as a professionally designed page. So if you notice, we actually have several words for our title here, but I've broken it into 3 lines. So we didn't have to change every single word of every single line, but you'll notice that I've done a lot of different typefaces, a lot of different fonts when I put these together. Now, take a look on your screen here. This is what our title would look like if we used a single font. So it's the same typeface, and by the way, that typeface is Peach Cakes. So we have used that, and we've used it the same color and the same size. So it looks okay, right? It still is a creative title. It's not just the word, Dallas, which is my granddaughter's name. It's not like just her name. So it is a creative title, and it's okay. It's okay aesthetically, the way that we have it, because we have it in 3 separate lines. But take a look now at this second image. So in this second image, I changed the font of the word you. Think about when you say this phrase, you are the joy of my life. You're really putting the emphasis on the word you. So in our second example here, I changed only the font of the word you. So I have still for that title, only using the typeface peach cakes, but the word you is a different font as it's much larger than the rest of the words. So as you're starting out using this new concept of designing your titles, try that for your initial step. Try changing just the font or just the size or color of one of the words and see what a dramatic difference that makes. But now look here in our third and final example. Look what that title now looks like when I have taken every line of our phrase and changed the typeface, the color, the fonts. Look how much more visually pleasing it is when we have all of that together. All right, so let's break down our final title piece by piece here. So the way that this is layered, we actually have to start with the are the joy pieces because the you and the of my life are going to overlap that piece. So you'll notice that the are the joy are individually lettered. So these are all the same typeface. Again, that's the peach cakes. It's all the same font because they're all the same color and all the same size. So all three of those words are all identical. Now, if this was our total title, again, we would want to change one of those words, but it's a portion of our title, so it's okay that we have these all three the same. Now, one thing I want to point out with this as well, I wanted my title to fit a certain kind of a space. So I wanted to create kind of a spatial awareness for that title. And we have individual letters here, which when we go to adhere those to the page, it can get thrown off, right? When we're laying them out one by one, we kind of forget, hey, we wanted to keep it in this narrow space, and then all of a sudden it's way longer or it's way skinnier. So what I like to do in my design is I create this little like label backdrop when I use individual letters, because that says those three words need to fit in the space between here and here. I do all of the designing in Design Space on the computer, so I can easily create that on the computer. But if you're not using the die cutting system, you could just cut a rectangular piece from a cardstock or a monochromatic pattern paper and let that serve as the base to those individual letters. So that will tell you, hey, they need to fit into this space when you go to glue them down. It also creates a visual interest, right? To have that extra little something behind those individual letters. So just something to keep in mind when you're working with a particular font that's not connected. So it's like your cursive fonts, if you can see that. That's what I mean by connected, that the word my is connected. You'll notice in your bag, all of these are individual letters. All right, so I've already glued those to our orange base there. So I am going to adhere that piece to our black mat. All right, and then we're going to pause there for a second, and we're going to talk about the word you. Now, the word you, the font I've chosen here, and it's one that I use a lot. So now that you see this font and I give this font a name, when you go back through my designs, you're going to see that I use this font a lot. So this here is Futura LT Condensed Extra Bold. And to me, when you have a short title or you really want a single word to stand out, a sans serif font is the way to go. So what I mean by that, a sans serif font is very clean on the edge. So take a look on the screen. If you look on the screen, I have two versions of the word you. So the version on the left is a serif font. And what I mean by that is, see those little, what we call feet? See those little like decorative edges at the edges of the sticks of the Y, of the tops of the the sticks of the letter U. See those little teeny feet? That is called a serif font. So if you look at the one on the right, those don't have the feet, correct? It's a very kind of clean version of that font, and that's called sans serif or no serif. So if you're ever in a bind, what kind of fonts go together? The very, very basic, most simple thing to do is when you're putting two fonts together, find one that is serif and find one that is sans serif. So one that has the little feet and one that doesn't. And those two will complement each other perfectly. Think of it when your mom said, opposites attract. It's kind of like that. They're the opposite. One is a little more decorative, one is a little more plain. And when they're paired together, they work perfectly together. So again, the very basic way to find two fonts or two typefaces that pair perfectly, find one that's serif, one that's sans serif. Now, I like sans serif fonts that are really chunky, really bold, because to me that really helps that stand out. When you look at this page, what is the first thing you see? You see the word you, correct? You, because it's big, it's bold, it's chunky. So anytime you want to put a really emphasis on a particular word, a particular title, a great way to go is that sans serif kind of chunky font. Now, look at this screen here for this other example. So in our sample here, Grinch mode, so our title only has two words, and remember my rule of thumb, if it's three or more, we need a change. So we didn't need the change because it's only two words, right? Grinch mode. But look at that fun, thick, chunky sans serif font that I've chosen for the Grinch mode. It really helps that title really stand out on that page, doesn't it? It really makes a statement. It says this is the headline, correct? Now, you know me, I had to add the little twist and put the little sneaky Grinch in the place of the I in our Grinch mode, but we've used just a single typeface, a single font to create that. So again, another little tip is if you're ever in a bind, you're only going to put one or two words on a page, stick with that very graphically simplistic, very clean, chunky, bold sans serif font. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and glue these two together. I also gave it just a little more pop or a little more interest by offsetting it or giving it just that little bit of a shadow. Again, it's not necessary, so don't feel that there's so much here. How will I ever keep it all straight? This is kind of like an extra bonus. This would look just as fine too if we didn't have that offset or that shadow. Again, I just like the extra visual interest there. All right. Now I'm going to pause for a second. So let's look at the word you. So I want you to look at the kerning or the spacing in between each letter. So look at the space between the Y and the O and the O and the U. See how it appears that there is a little more space between the Y and the O? Because when you type the word you, the computer will automatically kern it to whatever its default is. It will automatically space the individual letters as its, default or as it was designed to do. So that's what the kerning is. Now in part 2 of this chapter, we're going to talk about how to alter that, when to alter that, how to best utilize that. But I just want to go ahead and plant that term in the back of your mind. So that's what kerning is. Kerning is the space in between each letter. So again, just keep that in the back of your mind, because when we go to create titles in part 2, we are really going to utilize that effect to make our titles, even more graphically pleasing by just doing some minor little changes there. All right. So finally here, we have the of my life. So we're going to go ahead, and if you notice, this is a cursive font. So remember when we said opposites attract, right? So these are both sans serif fonts, right? So if you look at these, the word you are the joy, none of them have that little feet. So we can add something that's totally different, right? So of my life could have been a serif font, or in this case, we're making it a cursive font so that these letters flow together. And if you look, they're very different than what we have here. So remember that opposites attract when you're going to pair your fonts. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and adhere the word of. And then I'm going to pause there for a second. So the other term that I want to make sure that you learn in this lesson is letting. So if you take a look on the screen now, if you look at you are the joy of my life, notice the spacing in between the lines of text and how that is different. That is letting. Letting is the space in between the lines of text. So again, in part 2 of this chapter, we're really going to dive deep into that as well. But I want to plant that seed on what that terminology is. So keep that in mind with the letting and kerning as we assemble our titles here, and how we're going to use those to make our titles stand out even more. All right, so I have our last word here. Perfect. All right, so now that all of our elements are ready, we can go ahead and assemble our page, and let's get that together. So let me pull over here our background piece. And then I'm going to go ahead and layer them just like this. So if you notice, when we go to adhere our rainbow, it does overlap my photo mat just a little bit. So where that overlaps, I am not going to add any adhesive, just in case I want to slip that photo underneath later. But it's going to go here in that lower right corner, like so. And then we have our cloud. And all of this, now that they're all assembled, should come together quite easily. So I'm going to go pretty high, because if you notice here, we want to make sure we see the cloud here, and then we see the tail here, and just a little bit over here. So again, if you're doing it exact, we are going to go a little high on our rainbow. So it's going to look a little funny for now, but as you can see, it all comes together in the end. All right. For now, I'm going to lay the You Are the Joy title And I'm going to use that as my guide because I'm going to go ahead and add our flourishes here. And you'll notice they point in opposite directions. So make sure that you're grabbing the right one. Now when I put my adhesive, I'm just going to do just a little bit down the center there. We don't need to make sure it's the entire piece. It's going to go behind a protector. All right, so I'm using that title as my guide to adhere the two flourishes. Let me get that second one. All right. And there we go. Perfect. All right, now we can go ahead and adhere our title. Just like so. We got a few more elements here. So we have our triple star. We'll go ahead and add that. We're going to add that to the left of our title. Let's see, I want to make sure I still see the word you. There we go. And our little ladybug. We're going to just tuck that there. Again, we want to make sure that we don't go into our title at all, so you can still see those words. And I think for these two sets of stars, I'm going to throw a pop dot behind them and pop them off the page. You know me, we got to put more than one. All right. And then once we add these, we'll have our page complete. All right, let me peel off these backings. And you also know me to know who is going to be the star of my page, right? Little Miss Dallas. I'd love to see yours when yours is complete. See what photos you're going to add. All right, oops, there we go. All right, perfect. There we go. There is our complete left side of our spread. Now, if you take a look at the screen here, so with the spread, we have a pink version and a blue version. So if you'll notice, the elements, the title, the font, the typeface, everything, all of the elements are identical, just different color. But look at how dramatically different our page looks by rearranging them on the page, by using pattern papers in a different layout. We were also able to get in an additional photo by moving all of that around. So if you ever have two identical kits, if you move around the elements and don't have it exact, you know, the layout and design and not exact for both, look at how different they can be. Now, I do realize that we've used different papers and different colors, but you could use the same concept if you had two of the blue version or two of the pink version. Again, just by moving around papers, and adding or subtracting photo mats, look at how dramatically different our design can be. All right, let's put this away and then let's get started and wrap up with the right side of our spread. So of course, like we always do, we're going to start by creating the base and layering all the different pattern papers, and then we'll end with our title and our die cuts. So we're going to start off with the same background as we did the left page. So we're going to take out that cream white color with the yellow polka dots, and I'm going to snip off that barcode. And that is going to serve as the background to our page. The next thing you want to do, if you remember when we were working on our left page, we had that black that black polka dot paper there. Let's go ahead and pull that out. If you remember, we had cut that sheet in half, so we have this remaining 6 by 12 piece. We do need to cut that down a little bit, so let's cut that down to 6 by 10. 6 by 10. So we're just going to cut off just a couple inches from that piece. And we're going to adhere it. If you look here, we're going to adhere it towards the bottom of our page. So I'm going to flip that over. It's still kind of surprising when you look and it's the pumpkin, right? Because this is the farthest thing from a Halloween page. All right. So we're pretty close. We're only about a 1/4 of an inch from the bottom edge there when you go to adhere that. And we're about, let's say 1 1/4 inches from the left side. So it's just a little left of center. Not exactly in the center there. And again, I am going to use my polka dots so that I can ensure that my piece is straight on my background. All right, once we get that one done, we have left over that plaid pattern paper. So if you want to grab that piece of plaid that we had left over from the left page, we also need to cut it down again. We're just going to snip off a 1/2 inch. So we need it to be 11.5 inches. 11.5 inches. And that's again, just so I could see just a little border of our background on either side there. All right. I'm going to run my adhesive along those 4 edges. And then go ahead and adhere that there to the page. All right, again, using my polka dots to ensure that I have that piece straight. It is about, probably 1 inch or so from the top edge. Again, it doesn't have to be exact, but that is about 1 inch or so from the top edge of our page. All right. So now that we have those 2 pieces, before we put our final 2 pattern papers, the next thing we're going to do is, in your bag, you have that really large die cut scalloped square. So there are 2 pieces to that. So let's go ahead and pull those out of our kit. We're going to adhere those 2 pieces together. And again, this is just something to add a little bit of a visual interest. Instead of just doing, just a straight cut on our paper trimmer, it's kind of fun to give it that scalloped border edge there. If you look around that mat of that polka dot paper, just something a little more visually interesting than just the straight edge. All right, and then when we go to adhere this matted piece, we're going to use the black as our guide. So we're going to adhere our scallop square, just making sure that we see that little bit of black all the way around. And really look how that grounds our design here. It really helps create a great border. It's a really stark border that's going to serve as the base there of our photos. Again, I always love that hint of black, even when I'm working with pastels. All right, since this is a little bit heavier, I'm going to go down the middle as well. And then go ahead and adhere that to our page. All right, in your bag, you have now a 12 by 12 sheet of that multicolored dot paper. So it's white and it's got all of the perfect color matches for our yellows and oranges and pinks and greens and the hint of black in that. And again, it's that Halloween collection from Doodlebug. perfect. That's going to serve as just a tiny bit of an accent here, as we're only going to see a little bit around our photo mats. But again, I really love how that made it pop, and it coordinated so well, I had to use it, right? All right, we are going to cut this down to 8 1/4, 8 1/4 by 8 1/4. So 8 1/4 by 8 1/4. And then we are going to hear it. It's going to fit perfectly inside that scalloped square there. So running my adhesive just along the outer edge. And go ahead and adhere that square there of pattern paper. All right. We're going to have just one more pattern paper to go. So what we have left is our light pink pattern paper. So again, I love all of these papers together, but to put our title directly onto these pattern papers, it could get lost because this is a little busy. So between the pattern of the plaid and the polka dots, if we were to add the word smile just here, it could get a little lost in the confusion of all of the patterns. So we need something to kind of mat or to background our titles with something that's a little more monochromatic, because we want to make sure that we're still able to read those words. In this case, it's only one word, but with those individual letters, again, it's going to be a little harder to see. So again, when we are thinking about the design and adding our titles to the page, we want to make sure that those titles are easy to read. If we're going to take the time to learn how to masterfully put them together, we want to make sure that they stand out on the page. So we're going to do that by taking that strip of light pink paper. So it's the light pink with the stars that was left over from our first page. We do need to cut that down just a little bit. We're going to cut it down to 10 3/4. 10 3/4. And we're going to adhere it about a 1/2 inch from the top of the page there. So again, about a 1/2 inch from the top of the page. All right, perfect. And that's going to give us just a little bit more of a solid surface when it comes to laying out our title. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut the mats for my photos. So we're going to go ahead and cut the mats that would be for all 3 of these photos. Now, if you see behind me, we have the blue version of this particular design as well. So if you look at our blue version, I show you again how you can take those exact same die cuts and move them around the page. We're rearranging just a little bit. And on this one, we actually get 4 photos instead of the 3 we have here. So all of these designs, of course, are flexible depending on the kind of photos that you have, how many you have. Feel free to mix and match and move that all around to whatever works for you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and cut my mats here. We're going to cut the 3 1/2 by 5. Let me make sure I got that one right. 5 1/4, 3 3/4. Now I wanted the spacing to work out really well this way. So what visually worked is this is a little bit different of a size of photo than I would typically use. So this really is 3.5 by 5.5. I just liked how the flow worked well. And this way you only have to cut a 1/2 inch off of 2 sides of your photo, and then it fits perfectly, right? So that really is that. The mat will be 3 3/4 by 5 3/4. All right, and just one more here. We have this square mat, and that mat's going to be 3 3/4 by 3 3/4. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue these to my page. Now, again, I love the pop of black. If you didn't want this to be quite as bold, you could use this darker pink for your photo mats, would work beautifully as well. You could save the black and use it for something else. If you wanted to stick with a little more softer feel to mat your photos. It kind of depends as well if your photo background is dark or light. You know, if it's really light, it's nice to have that dark border around your photos. If your photos are dark in the background, perhaps you would want to do more of a lighter photo mat to separate those from our page. All right, perfect. All right, so now the fun part, we get to put all of our die cuts together. I'm gonna move this to the side and pull out our little bag of die cuts. And let's start assembling. So again, I'm gonna go in order that they are in our baggie. So for mine, I'm gonna pull out the word smile. And they are individual letters there. All right, so this is one of the cases where I was only going to use a single word for a title. So if that's the case, the sky's the limit, right? We don't have to worry about mixing and matching fonts. We can use, you know, a serif, a sans serif, a decorative font like this is. Really, in this instance, if you are new to pairing fonts, exactly what I did here is what I suggest. So if you are using any kind of die cutting system, whatever that system may be, search for the word you're looking for. So in this particular case, I'm using Cricut's Design Space. I put the word smile into my search engine and looked at the, 5,000 examples of the word smile that they have listed and just found one that really caught my eye. And this was an image in Design Space. So this wasn't a font that I had chose or that I had, written out SMILE. This was an image that was already designed for me. So it took all of the work out of that thought process of trying to choose the font. So don't hesitate. We have a lot of scrapbooking pages to put together. So don't hesitate if you ever need to use some kind of little cheat, if you want to call it that, and find a pre-designed word. That's beautiful. It's perfect, right? You could take the word smile and say if you wanted to add to that, you wanted to expand that phrase to make it larger, whatever your main word would be, look for that as your image. So if you want to say smile for the camera. So the word smile is our main word of the phrase. You would look for that image and then type out the words, for the camera, and then choose a font that would pair well with that. So since this is a serif font, you see how it has the little legs on the M there. You see the little curves, the bottom there of the L. A sans serif would work perfectly, right? All right. We're going to keep this side simple by using just the word smile. So I'm going to adhere my darker layers here first to our black mats. So the dark orange is going to get adhered in the center of our black. Luckily, this part is connected. We will also talk about that. So this is called welding. When letters are connected together, they are welded together. So that is also something we'll discuss in this chapter. What fonts work well to weld together. There are certainly some fonts that do not work well for that. So something to look forward to as we go along here. All right, with our lighter layer of orange, it's going to be offset just a little bit. So it's not going to go directly in the middle of the dark base. It's going to be a little high and a little to the left there, so not exactly in the center. Just a little fun whimsy to add to the title there. Just another way to add some visual interest. All right, I'm going to go slightly out of order, adhering my E. And then notice my L also is the dot of my I. So if you look at that and can't quite figure out what it is, it's the L actually is welded to the dot of the I, which is so great when you're working with a kit, right? No worry about looking for that little teeny dot, like the needle in the haystack. I think I got this upside down. Yep, there we go. All right, so that's going to be it. That's going to be our title for this side of the page. So you don't always have to, spend hours creating titles for every single page. I personally love the aesthetic of having a word or a phrase on every single page of my album. I know oftentimes when you have 2 pages, you can have just a single title, and that is meant to be shared amongst both pages. That's perfectly fine, and it's, to do that in your design is very pleasing to the eye. Personally, I just like to make sure that there's a word, a title on every page. Maybe that's the graphic artist in me. With a background in web design and magazine design, having that big bold headline on each page, to me, just kind of makes that page complete. But that's just a personal preference. But because I like a title on both sides of the page, it doesn't mean that they have to be something really extravagant. As you see here, it's just a single word. And look how, to me, this is just like the perfect little cherry on the top of the ice cream cone there. All right. So let's go now to our rainbow. So with our rainbow, the base of our rainbow is going to be that dark, the dark pink there. So I am going to start with the inside layers, that smallest, and kind of work my way out. I think that works easiest for me visually. So let's add that lighter pink there. And then we're just going to gradually get larger with every single little ray of our rainbow. So next we have that goldenrod, that darker yellow. Okay, and then it looks like what's next is that light green or the limelight. And again, notice how our base is the smooth, and each of these rays are canvas. Perfectly a-okay to mix and match. I tend to go by what color works versus the texture. And it's such great cardstock that even when you have the most intricate design, it's still going to cut beautifully no matter what texture you're using. All right, and our very final layer, you notice that the one that we started with is the color we're going to end with. Perfect. All right. And then I wanted to give it, again, I realized black wouldn't be a color on the rainbow, but I wanted to give it just a little more emphasis around our title. So we're going to glue our completed rainbow. We're going to adhere it here, slightly offset. So let me show you this once it's complete. So if you see there on the back, see how they line up? And see how it looks on the front. So the dark pink layer and the black layer are exact, so we need to offset them just a little bit. Now I do realize that they're not perfectly going to line up, but it's all okay, right? Because it's going to slip underneath our photo mat here when all is said and done. All right, let's pull out the remainder of our pieces here. And get all of those glued together. All right, so all of the stars here. My little Dallas is definitely the stars in my eye for sure. I'm obviously making myself use pink more and more and more, though my daughter-in-law isn't necessarily a pink-loving kind of gal. I have to admit, I've been having fun designing with pink and getting comfortable with that color as I've been working on little Dallas's scrapbook. It used to be colors that I definitely stayed away from. As a mom to 3 boys, blues and greens and oranges and browns are my go-to. And maybe that's also why I like that pop of black. It's kind of like when they say, you know, every wardrobe needs that little black dress. I think every layout needs a little pop of black. All right, our flourishes here will stand alone. There's no mat there. The same with our cloud here, as I was telling you my inspiration from the cloud on the first page, same. So I use these clouds as the Harley smoke. They were the motorcycle smoke. And I thought, I love that they were totally different than your normal, you know, clouds that would go with the rainbow. And I love, look how it really creates a flow. See how the line goes under smile, curves around. Our flourishes also take us, and they take us, the cloud takes us all the way over to our photo. I love that. I love that everything is purposefully in its place to create a flow. You know, our eye is drawn to this, but the flow always goes back to our photos. The photos are the highlight of every single page that we do. The pages might be beautifully designed, but it's the memories and the photos that really make them so special. All right, so our final die cut here, I'm just going to put it together. Of course, we used one of these on our left side. It's always great to bring the design element over, so it really helps tie the two pages together. And again, I'm using my Barely Art glue, and I'm just barely, no pun intended, just barely squeezing out just a little bit. Little bit goes a long way. All right. Those are so thin, aren't they? What a great cut. Those thin pieces of that star. The outline of the star there. I didn't use pop dots on any of these. You are welcome to. If you put it exact, just kind of keep in mind what's going to overlap. But because all of these overlap a little bit here and there, I actually didn't use any pop dots. And again, I didn't use any ink, but you definitely could. Especially our cloud here, if you wanted to give it just a little bit of an emphasis, you could use, I would suggest Strawberry Milkshake. Strawberry Milkshake is kind of a medium shade of pink. It would work perfectly for our cloud. Feel free to have fun playing around with those. All right. Almost complete here. Let's get our page back. And let's go ahead and finish putting everything together. So of course we're going to start with what's on the bottom and work our way up. So let's start with our cloud. All right, so we want the tip of my cloud, and I'm going to put so that it aligns there with the top of my photo mat. So if you're wanting to do it exact, you are going to put it just a little bit of an upward angle there. All right, so next is going to be the rainbow. Anybody else a Skittles fan? I also think of that when I see the rainbows, taste the rainbow. I ate so many Skittles when I was a little girl that it's almost hard to eat Skittles nowadays. Now, I can still eat them. But I ate enough to make myself sick when I was young. All right, I'm going to use my tweezers and scrape under just a little bit so that I can make sure that that cloud is exactly where I want it to go. So I want it to go just a little bit under my photo. Just like so. It's another reason I love this adhesive. Now, it is very tacky, but if you take like a spatula, you know, a little metal spatula, the tips of your tweezers, I'm able to pull that up. Now, over time, so if I were to try to do that a week from now, good luck. But while it's still fresh, I can kind of pull it up just a little bit to kind of rearrange. All right, so I'm going to eventually want our word smile right there. So I'm just going to lay that there so I can kind of use it as a guide, because of course we have to adhere what's on the bottom first. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and adhere my flourishes. And we're going to follow the curves of the cloud here when we adhere our flourishes. You know, when you go to Disney and everything has its exact place and it's there for a reason? The same thing with my designs. I truly try to think of every single design element every step of the way, and hopefully we've started training your mind to start doing some of that too on your own. All right. So the next here, we're going to adhere our triple star. And we're going to slip that underneath our smiles. We're actually going to end up adhering the word smile last. Again, that's not glued down yet. I'm just kind of using that as my placement guide so that I know exactly where all of these pieces are going to fit in. Okay, let's get our smallest star here. Going to slip underneath our title. And then lastly, we have our tiny little heart. So perfect. Look how all of that stuff just beautifully fits together. I love it. I love it. All right. And now, actually, because it's a pretty big piece, I'm going to use my tape runner to adhere our final little piece of our puzzle to complete our page. All right, beautiful. All right, let's get our 2 pages together there. There you go. Give yourself a pat on the back. All right, let's wrap up chapter 2, part 1, with the takeaway that I want to make sure that you remember, and then a little sneak peek at what we're going to learn when we start part 2. Thanks for tuning in to chapter 2, part 1 on our topic of typography. The 2 greatest takeaways from this lesson are to remember: 1, if your title has 3 or more words, be sure to change the color, size, and font of at least one of those words to create a visual impact. And number 2, opposites attract. When pairing fonts, choose one that's serif to go with one that's sans serif, or one that's tall and thin to go with one that's short and chunky. And be sure to read your instructional booklet for Chapter 2, Part 1 for all sorts of tidbits of knowledge. Be sure to tune in to Part 2 when we dive in deep and talk all about leading and kerning. Now go practice. Let's see what you create. And as always, happy scrapping!